Fáilte Rómha Cóide, you're welcome indeed to another edition of the programme. Now don't forget, later on Martin Logan is standing by as always, bringing you great stories featuring the Irish community right across the UK. This week we're in beautiful Strandhill in County Sligo to bring you a remarkable story of one of the great Mayo sporting legends of all time, Dick Hearns, and this is his story.
Himself and a pal went out the Crossmolina Road one Saturday evening looking for devilment, and he was coming back and they encountered an ass and cart, and he was hanging on to the back of the ass and cart, and he fell off and he damaged his spine on a stone. It was a stony road, and he was hospitalised for 3 months. The doctors told his mother that he'd never do well physically and that it would be as well for her to get him into a job that wouldn't require any great physical labour. So she got him in as an apprentice to a grocer in Ballina, and he absolutely hated it. Step sisters in America used to send them manuals, sports manuals, and I don't know if you remember the great Charles Atlas, who had the big fine muscles, physique with the globe on his back, and Daddy said that he always aspired to having a physique like Charles Atlas, and he determined to make something out of his life, and he planned with a pal of his, two pals of his, to head to Athlone and to join the new Free State Army. So some mornings after making up his decision, he headed off at 6 o'clock before anyone had got up at home, and he headed down to the railway station in Ballina, and as he said himself, ready to die for Ireland. And there were two men working on the engine of the train, and the two men chatted to the two young fellas and asked them what they were doing, and he said they were going to join the Free State Army in Athlone. And it turned out that the two men working on the train were Republican policemen, and they arrested the two warriors and brought them to the station and gave them a lecture and told them never to dream of doing anything like that again.
So he went on, yeah.
The pal dropped out, but Dick got another pal, and they walked the railway line from Ballina to Foxford to avoid the two policemen. And they knocked up the parish priest in Foxford looking for references. And he got up at the middle of the night and he wrote out 2 references and threw them down to him. And they got the train in Foxford and they headed to Athlone, and he enlisted in Athlone. And I have all his enlistment papers in my own records at home. Before he joined the Guards, he was promoted corporal in the army.
And then went on to the military police.
Yes, but he a very important part of his career, he volunteered to partake in the first physical training instructors course in the Curragh camp as a 17-year-old corporal, and he qualified as a PE instructor, and he became the PE instructor in Renmore Barracks in Galway. And then he joined the military police, and I believe that he did that with a view to applying to enter the Garda Síochána, and that he felt being a military policeman would have helped. And when he finished his 5-year service in the army, he returned to Ballina and applied for the Guards. And he was waiting there with his 2 brothers to be called to the depot.
As children growing up in the household there, you were surrounded by a certain amount of medals, and growing up, were you very much aware of your father's success?
Oh yes, yeah, very much aware. Talking about the surroundings, you know, he had a wonderful collection of silver trophies. He had 5 Irish Championship trophies, which were copies of the Arda Chalice, and he had his ABA title and his European Police. But we weren't too impressed because we had to clean the silver from time to time and get our hands black from the silver. But he was insistent that this would be kept up to standard. And he had a huge plaque of gold medals And if you went out with Dad, it was one procession of people coming up to him. He was famous in Dublin.
And was he very disciplined with you growing up?
Yeah, he was a great father. No, he never. I don't ever remember him getting angry with us. He led by example. He was a kindly father, and we all have wonderful memories of him. I only remember him in childhood and in my youth as having a pioneer pin on his uniform. And I have a lovely photograph taken in my own army uniform with him, and I had a pioneer pin. But then I came home from the military college one weekend, and he was sitting at the fire with my mother, and the two of them were having a glass of whiskey. And I said to him, "You're some pioneer." And he started to smile, and he said, "Sit down there now and I'll tell you." He said, "I loved a pint and a glass of whiskey, particularly after a boxing tournament or a football match where I could go away with my friends and my teammates." But he said, in 1941, when you were born, you were the fourth child in the family. And I realised that I couldn't afford to spend money on drink. And I went to the parish priest and I made a promise. I'd become a pioneer, and I'd remain a pioneer until all my children were reared and working. And he said, "Your brother Colm, the youngest of the family, went to Templemore 3 weeks ago." And he said, "I've kept my promise, and I'm promising now to enjoy a pint and a glass of whiskey for the rest of my life." And he did.
Des, your father had a tremendous football career.
True, yes. He had a football career in Gaelic football, and after his retirement from boxing and football, he, because of his prowess as an athlete and a trainer, physical trainer, he was trainer of a number of soccer teams, but yeah, particularly Shelburne and Sligo Rovers.
During his younger days playing, he actually played for 6 counties, which was very unique at the time.
It was unique, and it was due particularly to the fact that being in the Garda, Síochána, and in the army, he was posted to various parts of the country where his talent was obviously recognised, and he played for the county teams. Yeah.
And he joined the Mayo team then in 1930. He was on the panel that went to America in 1932.
That's right. He won a Connacht Championship medal with them in 1930, and they beat Sligo in the final. I think the score was 1-7 to 1-2, if I remember rightly. Yeah. And then he stayed with them. He went to the States with them. He won a Dublin Championship medal in 1929 when he was in the Guards. But before that, he won an All-Army Inter-Command title with the Southern Command, a feat which I achieved with the Curragh Command 60 years afterwards.
Wow. Over the years then, after winning that 36 final where he was the coach of the Mayo team, that must have been an exciting time.
He actually retired from the football at that stage because of his hands. As a boxer, he couldn't afford to have damage to the gold dust in his hands. So he stopped the boxing, but he still remained involved with them and was very much in demand. And he trained that Mayo team in 36. He was selected to train Mayo in 1949. They were beaten by Meath in the semi-final. 2 soft goals in the second half. And then as a result of that, they brought in a new trainer, Gerald Carrell, for 1950 and 51.
And if I could turn to soccer then, he actually was very involved in soccer as well, and had some great achievements in that as well, particularly in Dublin, the Shelburne club.
That's right. I think he started with Sligo Rovers, and then Shelburne were a prominent club at the time, approached him to become manager and trainer. And they won, under his tutelage, they won the FAI Cup in 1960 and 62. They won the National Soccer League in 61. And on many occasions, he was selected to be trainer for the Irish soccer team. And he was selected for that famous or infamous match against Yugoslavia, I think it was 1960, when, due to the influence of certain clerics, certain people who were in state employment, including my dad, were advised by their commanding officer that they shouldn't take part in it because the Yugoslavs were communists. So he didn't. He obeyed orders. And he has another distinction which is somewhat less well known. He was training the Garda Gaelic football team who were playing against the great St. Vincent's team in the 1950s. And the Garda fullback was that great hero of Mayo football, Paddy Prendergast, fullback, the prince of fullbacks, magnificent. And he was injured, and my father ran out with his little trainer's bag with lotions and potions and knelt down to attend Prendergast. And with this, some kind of psychic, he saw movement behind him, and he turned around, and the great Ollie Freeney, who was no longer with us, was trying to hit him a slap. And of course Daddy just stood up, and down went Freeney. And there was an influx of supporters from both teams came onto the field from the sideline seats, as a result of which, after an inquiry, the sideline seats were removed from Croke Park, never to be seen again. And it was partly due to my father's.
His career in boxing spanned a decade from 1929 essentially to 1939. And it started when he joined the Garda Síochána in 1928 and went to the depot in the Phoenix Park, Dublin. At that time, most of the Irish national boxing champions at the higher weights, from light up to heavyweights, were guards. In fact, in 1930, the Garda Boxing Club held a total of 43 national titles among them. And so he started out meeting people like the great Matt Flanagan, Boy Murphy, Jack Driscoll, all wonderful boxers. So here you had this young 19-year-old, this 20-year-old, getting in and getting training with these great boxers. In 1930, essentially at the end of his first year in the Garda, he won the Leinster light heavyweight title, which he repeated again in 31 and 32. Altogether in his career, Dick had 198 fights, of which he won 173. And of the 25 that ended up in defeat, he reversed the decision in 10 of them, eventually beating them the second time. He was competing in the Leinster light heavyweight championships at that time because he was based in Dublin. He never in fact competed in Connacht in his home province, but in 1933 he won the Irish light heavyweight title for the first time. And he went to America with the Irish boxing team. They fought in Soldier Field, Chicago, against the American Golden Gloves champion. There was 48,000 people at the fight, and he lost a decision by the referee, a referee's decision, the great Jack Dempsey, the Manasseh Mauler, against Dick had fought a man called Max Marek, who earlier that year in 33 had beaten the great Joe Louis. And the newspaper reports that there was quite an angry reaction from the crowd when the decision was announced. In fact, the next contest wasn't allowed to proceed for quite some time. He won the Irish light heavyweight title again in 1934. In 35 he was sick and wasn't able to compete, but that was perhaps his best year. In 35 he fought in the Royal Albert Hall in London in the Open ABA title, beating Roger Michelot of France in the final. He also won the European Police light heavyweight title that year. In 36, he would have been due, or perhaps to represent Ireland in his weight class at the Olympic Games of 1936. But for various, mainly political reasons, Ireland didn't send a team to that Olympics. And the winner of the gold medal in the light heavyweight class was none other than Roger Michelot of France, that he had beaten already. Another man that he defeated was Erling Nielsen of Norway in 1932. Nielsen was a heavyweight, in fact, and there's quite a story behind what happened. They went by boat over to England first and then up to Norway. And Dick fought 2 internationals in Norway, one in Oslo and one in Bergen. And that's where he beat Nielsen, who was the heavyweight. Nielsen won the bronze medal at the 36 Olympics in Berlin. But sadly, he never got there. In 1937 and in 1938, again, he won the Irish title. So 5 Irish titles, an Open ABA title, a European Police title. He fought the great Jack Peterson in the Mansion House in Dublin as early as 1931, while still quite a young man. Peterson retired from amateur boxing the night after that fight and took up professional, and he won the British Empire heavyweight title, which he held for 8 years. So they were some of the great boxers that he met over a span of 10 years, essentially.
Is there one thing out of the whole trophies and medals, is there any one thing that stands out as your proudest possession of your father?
It's a memory. And when I started to work first, I was paid £2, 10 shillings a week. And I gave my mother 30 shillings and I had £1 to live on. And I got a rise and I was giving it to my mother, and my father, she said, give it to Dad. And I gave it to him, £1. And eventually when I was getting married, we had planned our honeymoon in London, and he came to me and he gave me every £1 back. And he said, I saved it for you. So we changed our honeymoon. That's a memory of a father thinking, because I wouldn't have saved £1 a week. So he was a great father, a very Christian man. His faith was very strong in him.
Now, we've spoken an awful lot about your father, Dick, but of course your mother had a very important role as well, hadn't she?
Oh, she did.
His success.
I was hoping you might mention that, because we've talked a lot about the great man,
Yeah.
but there's, of course, the saying, behind every great man, there's a great woman. And our mother was a great woman.
Yeah. And she was still a proud Mayo woman, wasn't she?
Very proud of being born in Ballymena, outside Ballina. And her input to Mayo in Dublin was a secretary, honorary secretary of the Mayo Association in Dublin. And later on, she was president for maybe 25, 30 years. And I have a little souvenir here of the menu for the reception and dinner of the Mayo football team after the 1951 All-Ireland. And she would have organised that with her committee. And there's actually a photograph of the team inside in it. Yeah, we were actually at the match and on the sideline for that match.
Vince, we talk a lot about Dick and his great achievements, and of course his memory does live on with the Dick Hearns Centre in Ballina. That's very important to the family.
That's correct, yeah. When our daughter Orla, my daughter, and Mona's daughter Orla, went to live and work in Ballina, she's a journalist at the newspaper, she said that she couldn't really hear much about her grandfather. So Mona and I decided that we would present a silver cup in his name to the Ballina Boxing Club, which had been founded in 1927, just when he started boxing. And Ballina Boxing Club is there since, it's coming up near its centenary year. And they came and approached us at the time and asked us could they use Dick's name. And of course we agreed as a family, absolutely. So they called it the Dick Hearns Fitness and Training Centre at that in their existing thing. But then we decided that no, we would want to have that separate from the boxing club as such. So we established a company limited by guarantee with a long name, but trading as the Dick Hearns Centre. We have designed and have got planning permission to build a whole new physical training centre in Ballina at the Sports Leisure Centre up where the swimming pool is and the grounds. And we have a very ambitious budget to do that, and been looking for a grant, which is very slow and coming, sadly. But it's going to happen that this new gym will be there in his name.
Had he been around today boxing, how would it compare, do you think, to his days?
His main feature, apart from his ability, was his discipline and his training. He trained in the ball alley in the Garda depot. And he always held that handball was great training for boxing and for any sport. Because you were bending, you were lifting, you were using both hands, striking muscles and so forth. And I'd say his physical fitness, his level of fitness would match any of the present day people who are in these high efficiency training centres, and you know. But of course, it has to be said that he would have been viewed as a professional, because being in the Guards, they were in full-time training, without a few exceptions, you know, and that's how they did so well. Hard to know how it would be. There's a lot of scandals and everything about boxing lately, and there was none of that codology in his time. You went in and you did your business, and that was it. There were no drugs and rock and roll. Yeah.
The other thing is, of course, back in the 30s, very often it was 6 rounds they fought, not 3.
Right. And 5 rounds.
And 5 rounds.
Yeah.
You know, there were long
He boxed
fights.
5 rounds against Jack Peterson.
Yeah.
In the Mansion House. Yeah.
The year he won the British ABA Open Championship in the Albert Hall in London, he had his first fight at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning, and he had his third fight at 9 o'clock on Saturday night.
Which we unheard of nowadays.
And as the boys told you earlier, the man he beat in the final was to be the next year's Olympic champion. That was the standard. 3 fights in the one day. But he told me probably the biggest fight he had was he retired in 1939, encouraged by my mother, because he was getting
worried about
his eyes. He was in the stadium a few weeks after he retired, and they persuaded him to fight, and he fought the Irish heavyweight champion and beat him. But in the process, he cut his eye. So he said if it was a tough fight in the stadium, it was nothing to the fight in Ellesmere Avenue when I arrived home to your mother. So he said the second retirement was final.
Yeah.
But of course, it was all in his own interest that she wanted him to.
Of course, yeah. But he ended his career on a high. I mean, he achieved so much. Incredible. As I said at the beginning of the programme, a real Mayo sporting legend.
I think
48 of his fights were internationals.
Yeah.
And from my memory of him, you know, he was terribly proud to put on that green singlet. That was special to him, with the emblem of the shamrocks on it, you know. So from a national point of view, he would.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your memories of a great man, and hopefully his memory will be remembered for many, many years to come.
Thank you very much, Henry.
Thanks very much, Henry.